Hey everyone, welcome to PunkCast. My name is William Maxwell. I'm a student of Web3 and the owner of Punk1111. CryptoPunks are 10,000 uniquely generated characters stored permanently on the Ethereum blockchain. No punk is the same. This is a show dedicated to celebrating the punks behind the punk. My hope for this podcast is that we capture the essence of the punk culture, elevate the brand and the individual behind the punk. One last thing. Projects discussed on the show is not financial advice. Crypto and NFTs are a volatile and risky asset class. Please always do your own research. Other than that, let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of PunkCast. Today we're back with a special punk. His number is 1111. He's got a peak spike, shadow beard, and silver chain. In real life, he's a blockchain historian building a collection of culturally relevant and historically significant NFTs. He's also the co-host of Provenance Art, a podcast that focuses on intelligent conversations and a deep appreciation for digital art. Please welcome Von Mises to the show. Von, how are you, man?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me, Max. I appreciate it.
No, I've been wanting to have this conversation for quite some time. Big fan. Love your collection and love your insights as well. So yeah, great to finally have you on podcast.
Cool. Good to be here.
Why don't we just start with your handle, Von Mises? Why Von Mises?
So Ludwig von Mises is considered the father of the Austrian School of Economics. And when I spent time in traditional finance, I gravitated towards Austrian School of Economics. I mean, despite learning more traditional economics in school, I always felt that there was quite a few flaws in the more traditional Keynesian economics model that's taught at, around the world, more or less. And when I started reading the writings of Ludwig von Mises and the Austrian school, it really kind of made me see things in a little bit different way and maybe helped me to understand the way things actually work a little bit better. And frankly, I think that Keynesian economics is taught because it benefits government and government spending, whereas Austrian school, doesn't have that same bias. So when I started my Twitter, I just said, you know what, I'm going to use von Mises because I'm a big fan of von Mises. And obviously I didn't expect to make the splash I made in crypto and NFTs and on Twitter. And, now more people hopefully are aware of Austrian School of Economics, and you're starting to see it more. I'm starting to see more people talking about Austrian School of Economics for sure. I mean, obviously not because of me, but just in general. And I think that even though Ludwig von Mises has been dead for a long time and most of his writings were in the 1920s, 1930s, even today, a lot of his work is quite relevant and worth people's attention. And so that's why I took it. I took it because I think that he gives insight into things that other people don't really know, and most people won't know who von Mises is. But occasionally someone says, "Oh, I'm a big fan of Austrian School of Economics," and that is that's a good insight to me that person is someone knowledgeable and scholarly and willing to work a little bit. It makes me more inclined to want to engage with them as well.
Yeah, amazing. I'm probably in that camp that I haven't really heard of von Mises as well, but I have heard of Austrian economics through the Bitcoin Standard and those, and who was it? What was the author's name? Saif Dean. So he was a big Austrian economist kind of guy.
Okay.
Cool. And then why don't you just give us a brief introduction to, I guess, yourself and your background, as much as you're willing to share, and I guess everything before crypto.
So I was in traditional finance for a while, working in a major U.S. city, and did that for a long time. It was an institutional level job, so talking to professional investors, and it required me to be very knowledgeable about a lot of different assets and asset classes, and I would read quite a bit. And through my love of finance and my thirst for knowledge, I eventually came across an article about Bitcoin. This was in 2011, and I was fascinated with it. Within a week of reading my first article on Bitcoin, I had acquired some Bitcoin through MTGOX, Mt. Gox, and I bought more through that, and that's how that was what I was doing. Traditional finance was what I was doing before crypto, and then, but in 2011, I got into crypto, and obviously have had my attention since.
Amazing. And just maybe going back a bit too. So I'm assuming you sort of studied finance prior
Yes.
to your job, but of all the things you could have done, like why did you choose finance?
I don't. When I was in college, I remember taking my first economics class and really liking it, and then taking finance classes and doing really well. And I remember, friends and roommates like would struggle with this, and it came really, really, really easy to me. Like they would be studying for exams, and I would basically not go to class and just do really well on the tests. So it seemed like it was natural for me. The logic of it, the thought process, the psychology of it all. I don't know. It just for me, it made sense. It was very apparent to me that a lot of things were I was not good at, but finance was something that I was always that just came pretty natural to me. So that's why I ended up going in that direction.
Gotcha. And then so you were in traditional finance and more speaking with institutional guys. I would have thought like if you were sort of in the deep into TradFi world, it would be pretty hard for you to break away into something like Bitcoin. What did you see in that article that made you want to make the jump into or get red pilled?
I mean, it's interesting. Like the article talked about the problems that other digital currencies had, and it talked about specifically about the problem of double spending and actual scarcity, and it talked about why Bitcoin was different in terms of solving a lot of these problems. So Bitcoin solved for the double spending problem, solved for the ability to enforce scarcity, and I just thought it was different. And I remember after buying some, I remember talking to a hedge fund friend of mine, and I said to him, I said, "Oh, I'm got involved in this thing called Bitcoin," and I told him, I said, "Look, I think that there's a 95% probability that you're going to lose all or most of your money if you buy it, but here's why you should still buy it," and laid out like these scenarios where you have these very tail scenarios that you could have this big upside. My logic was that everyone was doing a lot of online shopping things by 2011. That online shopping was obviously popular. People were spending stuff, buying stuff on the internet, and I felt like the world needed a digital cash equivalent, meaning something that gave some level of anonymity, something that gave the ability to transact in an on-demand way that didn't require a credit card or processing. And I was like, okay, well, this is the first one I've seen that actually makes some sense. And so I was like, okay, let's get involved in it. The real aha moment, though, came about 6 months later when I read an article about the Silk Road and how people were able to buy all kinds of things that you couldn't buy normally. And I thought, well, let me just take a look at this. And I was like, I saw that you could buy weed online. And I was like, okay, I really wanted to see if it would actually work. And I created an account on the original Silk Road, and I spent some Bitcoin, and a couple of days later, this weed showed up. Uh, where I live now, it's now legal, but at the time it wasn't. And I wasn't really big. I didn't have a lot of friends that were like, I just didn't have a lot of friends that could get it. So I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And that was really the big aha moment, because now I've already realized that that Bitcoin was something interesting in the terms that it was a digital cash equivalent. But now I actually demonstrated utility in a way that I could never have pictured being done before. So then I was like, okay, you know what? I need to really make a reasonable. I need to put some money into this because worst case, me and all my friends, smoke weed for free. And when that's your downside, you got a lot of upside if that's your downside.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so that, I mean, it was the genesis of the idea was just recognizing the potential upside and the need for it. The proof of concept was when you actually could do something with these Bitcoin that you couldn't do with anything else. And so, yeah, I mean, that's how I got into Bitcoin. And obviously, once you have that positive experience, like pretty much immediately, the value of the Bitcoins that I bought went up about, I don't know, like let's say 8x almost within the first couple of months. And I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting. And at the time, you were still under like $20 million market cap for Bitcoin. So still pretty tiny. And yeah, and that's what's really started me on my digital asset journey.
Was that a solo journey for you, Von, or were you with a group of friends, or were you on like Reddit channels trying to?
I would read the message boards, but I mean, I mentioned Bitcoin to hundreds of investment professionals, and effectively none of them listened to me. There was one friend of mine who I had given some investment advice to before, and he bought some Bitcoin, not believing in it at all, strictly doing it because I recommended it. And he bought it maybe around $25 and sold it around $175 and thought he was, loved me, thought it was the greatest trade he'd ever done. I didn't want him to sell it, but it's fine. People do their own thing. He made 7x on his money. He was pretty happy with me.
Yeah, amazing. And then and so what was next for you? So that was in 2011, so super early. And I think it probably was like another 5 or 6 years before the next ICO boom came along.
Yeah.
So were you just holding Bitcoin and just hanging out? Were you stacking? And then what was next? Like, did you participate in the ICO sort of era?
There was a couple big rallies that I did sell some Bitcoin into, like maybe 2015. I think there was a big rally. Maybe it got to like 13 or 1400, and it was right around Thanksgiving time. I remember, and I remember selling some into that. By the time when the ICO boom came around, which was in 2017, I wasn't really playing in it. Like I was still pretty focused on traditional finance, and while I always kept my eye on Bitcoin, and obviously what happened in 2017 was quite a big move. We started the year at 1,000 and went to just under 20,000. Obviously, I mean, it definitely got a lot of people's attention. I remember in 2017, probably when Bitcoin got to like eight to 10,000. That's when all the people that I had spoken to about Bitcoin started coming back to me and saying, "Hey, you mentioned this to me when it was like $200 or $100 or $500," and they were like, "What do you think of it here?" And I'm like, "I'm still super bullish. You should get involved." And I don't really think very many people listen, but that was the moment that I was like, wow, this is actually starting to really catch fire because everybody now is coming out of the woodwork and calling me and asking me and talking to me about it. And, and then of course at the highs, everyone is in a fever pitch for it. And I did sell some, in that 15 to 20,000 range. And but still held some and still have some. And so,
Did you
uh,
did you discover ETH then at all, or was you just still in BTC?
I had not looked at ETH. So probably because I didn't play in the ICOs, I wasn't really focused on other coins. I was kind of at the time of Bitcoin maxi. And it wasn't until 2019 that I bought anything else. I shouldn't say that. I did own a little bit of ETH in 2017. Not a lot. Like ETH was like 2% of the digital asset portfolio.
Gotcha. So yeah, walk us through that. So then, 2019 comes along, or you had a little bit of ETH. When did you start paying attention to ETH, or what was your sort of next move in crypto after Bitcoin?
The next move was buying. I mean, I had accumulated a little bit of ETH, a few other tokens I thought made sense. I think I might have owned Baker. I might have owned Uniswap when they did the IPO for that. I mean, not ICO for that. But realistically, NFTs was the next thing that got my attention. So I remember seeing some ads for Gods Unchained, and I had played Magic the Gathering a little bit. And so I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I like the trading aspect of it, and I like the collecting, and I like the competitive nature of it as a card. I like the card game, and so I when Gods Unchained was doing their Genesis sale, I bought a bunch of packs, Genesis packs, and started playing the game competitively and had fun playing it. And didn't really think a lot more about it, but within about 6 months, when I started seeing how like the trading aspect of it, and given my traditional finance background, I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I need to look a little bit more into this. And from having collected various things in the past, I had a relatively good understanding of what makes a collectible interesting or not. And I said, okay, let me just go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, what can you timestamp this? When was that? When you started buying Gods Unchained?
It was, I want to say it was October of 2019, I'd say.
Oh well, so okay, so it's still pretty early before NFTs really took off. So October 19, and Gods Unchained, was it literally a Magic the Gathering card game NFTs? Was it?
It's still around. It's still played. I still play it actually, so on occasion.
Okay, is it on ETH or what's it on?
It's on ETH, yeah. Well,
Okay,
it was
cool.
originally built on ETH, and then when ETH went crazy and gas prices spiked, they they started building IMX. So IMX is actually, it was created as a result of Gods Unchained. And so interestingly, by holding a lot of the Gods Unchained cards, they dumped me a huge amount of IMX tokens. So it ended up being a really good trade, despite the fact that Gods Unchained hasn't really done a whole lot. But I started getting into like trying to understand more about NFTs at that point. Having had the success in Bitcoin, I was predisposed to, looking at other blockchains and other things related to blockchain. So I started doing some research on NFTs. And so the first things that came to mind were like Axes and CryptoPunks and CryptoKitties. And so I started looking into them. And the first NFT I bought after Gods Unchained was a CryptoPunk. And that was in April of 2020.
Which one was that? Do you remember?
I think I sent it to you on the form you asked me to fill out. I don't remember. It was
So is it the current one that you have as your profile pic?
no,
It's a different
it's not that one. Yeah, it's a different
Okay.
one. I think I paid 1.15 ETH. I think it was $125.
Okay, so actually I got it. Yeah, 7182. Let me have a quick look. Yeah, this guy's cool. He's got the frumpy hair and the horn rim
Yeah, yeah.
glasses, gold chain, mole, earring.
He's got it
Yes.
going. He's got it all going on.
uh, yeah, so September. So this was a Hemba. So you bought this one off Hemba. It was a
Yeah.
Hemba Punk. So April 22nd for 1.1 ETH for $209. Wow, what a steal.
Yep.
That's
And I
cool.
proceeded. I bought 60 punks in my first 30 days. So over the course of the next month, yeah, I I definitely got the bug. Like when I looked at punks, I pretty much knew what I was looking at. I had collected a lot of stuff in my life, and I was like, I thought it was one of the better collectibles that I'd ever seen. And early, cool, thriving community. I mean, it had everything going for it. And of course, CryptoPunks really catalyzed everything that I felt like everything in my life almost prepared me for that moment, because this was something that combined trading and collecting and crypto all into one. And, that was pretty big. So yeah,
Yeah,
I bought quite.
so Von, maybe walk us through that. This is, I mean, given that it's PunkCast, I think this is probably what most people would want to sort of understand. If we can just, go through it step by step. So, how did you actually find out about punks? Like,
So as soon as I started researching NFTs, I remember finding something that might have been like called the NFT Bible, or it was put out by some research. It was like, CryptoPunks first NFT on the Ethereum blockchain. Now I know that a lot of people have since come out and said that it's not actually the first NFT on the Ethereum blockchain. And while that is true, it is the first NFT on the Ethereum blockchain that anyone fucking cared about. So pardon my language. No one cared about ether cards. No one cared about, I mean, nobody cared about these things. Okay. So Punk, in my opinion, all roads lead back to punks. It's the first NFT to get any traction, anybody really paying attention, anything even caring about. Granted, after NFTs blow up, everybody goes back and says, "Okay, here's 4 things that happened before punks." True, nobody cared. Nobody would have cared if everything
why do
hadn't
you,
blown up.
why do you think that is? Like, why do you think punks were special, and the fact that people sort of cared versus the
I
other sort
think
of
that like
NFTs?
I think that like the people that got involved early, definitely had a, a deeper understanding of the technology than I did. Meaning, I'm one of the earliest people to come to punks from a finance background. I mean, almost everybody else was there was techno nerds, computer programmers, crypto nerds, stuff like that. So I think that the people that got involved just said, "Hey, this is kind of cool and interesting. It's the first time you could really own a, a, a digital asset that had provable scarcity," and I think that got a lot of people's attention. I also think that, I mean, CryptoPunks are just kind of lovable. They're little characters and they're simple and they evoke an emotional response in people. And I think that that's one of CryptoPunks' biggest draws is that not only being early and a great collectible, but the emotional response that they can evoke in people, I think is pretty strong.
That's right. I mean, like now that you're sort of talking, I think like whilst punks weren't the first NFT, they probably were the first PFP. And I think, that building that emotional connection, I think it's easier to build one with something like a face or an identity than a crypto kitty or a curio card. So yeah, I get your emotional sort of aspect there as well.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, and the utility of a CryptoPunk, just like, being able to use it for your Discord profile or use it for your Twitter profile. I mean, it's very powerful and very strong. And then I think that, every time I see people comment about CryptoPunks, a lot of times I will say, like, I don't think you're looking at it right. I said, CryptoPunks, in my opinion, aren't popular because they're early. They do happen to be early, but they're popular because some of the biggest builders and contributors in the space use them as a representation of their digital identity and have been using them as a representation of their digital identity long before they were cool and long before they were valuable. So the people like myself and, I mean, I've been repping a punk since my punk, I've been repping a punk since they were $100. Like, I didn't start repping a crypto punk because it was a digital flex or I was trying to show off. I did it because I respected the other people that were in this group at the time that were using CryptoPunks as their digital representation. And that's why I use them. And that's why I continue to use my CryptoPunk. And I've never changed ever since I made this CryptoPunk that I currently use, number 1111, as my profile. I've never changed my profile pic.
what um, what was it about punks, or what is it that you read that obviously got you red pilled and made you go and buy 60 punks in the next sort of 30 days after reading all that research?
Yeah, I mean, just from my experience in collectibles, early is important. And so
Yeah, do,
being
you- do, you want, do, you
early,
want do you want to share a little bit about that? Like, what were you collecting early in your life?
I don't really want to get into it because I'm some of the more off the run collectibles could potentially be a little bit doxing. So I'm probably, I mean, look, we could talk about something like baseball cards or watches or something like that. Like a lot of the ingredients that you might look for in a good collectible, CryptoPunks had. So, enough of them were out there that it wasn't like you had a very, very finite number that was too small to really create a mass movement. The fact that there was a vibrant community that was already built around CryptoPunks and daily people were talking about it. Now, granted, in early 2020, there was like 30 of us in the CryptoPunks Discord that were talking about CryptoPunks every day, but we were all very passionate. We all saw it. I mean, some of the comments that people made, like, again, talking about them being in museums, talking about them being at the top auction houses, talking about six-figure sales, talking about $1 million sales. This is when these things were a couple $100. And like, there was a lot of pretty visionary comments that people talked about because we did see it as something very revolutionary and interesting and game changing. So it had a lot of the traits that I have seen in other collectibles that to me spoke to why this would be something big. I mean, some of the Discord comments I made I was very, very bullish and very vocal about how bullish I was. It just seemed very clear.
Do you remember much of the Discord vibe back then? Like, was there still people that are here today that were there back then, or most of them sort of drifted off?
Yeah, I mean all the mods, so Shuli and Ross and Nifty Not, Crypto, myself. I mean, I'm not as active in the Discord as I used to be. I'm trying to think who else would I see all the time. The Snowfro used to be there. I mean, all the time, literally daily. All the mods you would see, a Raster Eye. I mean, all of us were very, very much on the same page. Dr. Terminus, I don't see him there as much as I used to. But we were all sharing that vision.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then talk to me about your 60 punks that you bought. How are you thinking about which ones to buy? Did you have traits you were trying to get?
Yeah, definitely. Like I came at it from a very collector's perspective. And while this gave me some very good insight, it also led me a little bit of astray. We can get into that in a second. So I was definitely trying, I'm a completionist. I'm definitely a quote unquote collector. So I was trying, well, actually, at one point I did have every single trait. At one point, I've owned about 100 punks total. I had 75 at one time at the peak. That's the most I ever had at one time. And now I'm down to about 17. But I definitely looked at it from a collector standpoint. So like rarity was very important. So, all like sub 100 trait punks, I definitely went after. But what ended up happening is as prices went from $100 to $1,000 to $10,000 to $100,000, that was when the inflection point really happened. When they started getting in that $50,000 plus range, the mindset of the people collecting punks changed quite a bit in the sense that when they're a couple $100, you could everyone was not everyone, but most of the people that were hardcore were trying to build big collections and full sets or gravitate towards sets of traits that they wanted. And as a result of that, the choke points became the traits that had very low populations. So, something like a beanie was very valuable and still is, but had a bigger premium because there's only 44 beanies. So if you wanted a beanie, you had a lot of competition because we're all kind of going after the same things. But then once the price really skyrocketed and people started using them, only having one or two or just a couple and using them as their digital persona, eye appeal and avatar worthiness went way up in value and rarity started getting devalued. So, I have more than my fair share of really great looking punks that I'm holding on to. The punks that people have collected because of rarity over the last 2 years hasn't really worked out as well. I mean, honestly, when you're buying punks for $500 or $200, they all go up crazy. It doesn't, if you paid a premium for a rare one, you're still making good money. But in a lot of ways, the floor was the better way to really to trade it.
I mean, I mean, do you still think that's the case now? I mean, given where we are on the market, I think like I've sort of seen like a lot of mids floating around the floor. I think you can probably get some pretty good looking punks hovering around the floor now as well. I mean, would you?
I mean, I would say that you can't get a punk that I would call super avatar worthy until like right now because the floor has fallen a fair bit. You would need to probably pay, in my opinion, at least 25% above the floor to find something that's I would say is really good and probably realistically even more. Now, at the peak, you'd still have these big premiums for punks that have strong eye appeal. So I don't think that's going to go away now that the market's matured quite a bit. So I think punks with high eye appeal are going to always have a big premium to them. And rarity, for, at least for now, is definitely gotten pushed aside. Although I think that as the market matures even further, I do think punks that have rarity and eye appeal will ultimately be the ones that are going to be the super grails in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking at your current punk collection as well, and I've noticed that. I mean, it's a beautiful collection. So you've got a pretty cool red nose zombie, which is kind of cool. But there's a couple in there that really stood out to me. One was the bald couple, 8403. He's just got classic shades, and you got the female version as well.
Yeah,
3287. They look really cool together. Like, how are you thinking about that?
the interesting thing about those two is that those are also the only two single trait punks with classic shades. So there's only two of them like that. And I like to say those when I bought the first one pretty early. When I got the second one, I started calling them fraternal twins separated at birth. It's interesting because they could have been different skin color. It's quite odd that they also happen to be the same skin color. So they're the only two classic shade single trait punks, and they're the same skin color. So that's
Love it.
not very common.
I love discovering these little nuances around the collection as well, and the different way people sort of collect within the collection. It's
Yes.
really cool. And then of all the punks that you've had, I mean, you've had like over 100 punks, give or take, over your NFT career. Why have you stuck with CryptoPunk 1111 out of all of them? Peak Spike, Shadowbeard, Silver Chain.
I don't know when I mean, well, first of all, the number is kind of cool, although that's not really why I bought it. I remember an OG collector named TJ. He claimed that punk, and he had three CryptoPunks. One was a zombie, one was this number 1111, and then he had a third one. And he had lost the keys or the password to wherever device it was on, and then somehow he found it, figured it out, and got back in. And he listed this punk, and I made him an offer of 1.111 ETH for it, and he sold it to me. And I was like, "Oh, this is a really cool punk." I don't wear a silver chain, but in the same sense, I guess it kind of looks like me. I mean, as much as a punk can look like somebody, I feel like okay, this could be me. So I just thought it was a good representation of myself. I kind of like the shadow beard, and I also feel like I didn't want to have like I wasn't using my CryptoPunk collection as a flex, so I didn't feel like I needed to use my zombie or my beanie or one of the crazy or the I just wanted a punk that really was me, and I didn't care about the quote unquote flex aspect of it. So that's kind of why I picked that punk. And I don't know. Then I started using it in my Twitter, and people just like when they would see that punk, it became me. And so, oh, that's Von Mises. And so why would I change it? That's who it is.
Love it. Love it. I love you the way that you're just describing that too, and I think this is probably why I like interviewing punks as well. I think collectors like yourself and just listen to it is a very pure approach to collecting, and
And
something that we've missed along the way in some ways. So it's always really nice to hear these stories. And I did actually have TJ on a previous Punkcast as well, and we did speak about CryptoPunk 1111 in that pod as well, so that which is kind of cool.
He came actually. I got a chance to meet him actually at the Beeple event
Oh, nice,
in Charleston, so that was cool.
amazing, yeah, oh, cool. Wow, so what a sort of punk journey you've had, and then so outside of punks, like what was sort of next for you? I know you're sort of a big collector, and I've had a look at through some of your collections. You've got a pretty amazing one, and it looks like you collect everything from photography to gen art to all sorts of things. So can you talk a little bit about your sort of collecting style, and what kinds of things you sort of look for that would make a strong sort of collection for you to find interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one more thing we should just talk about that feeds into what you're asking. Uh, One of the things about CryptoPunks and the CryptoPunk community and that small, closely knit, zealot-like community that we had in the beginning was there was a lot of idea sharing and people talking about things that they liked. And, one of the craziest things was through CryptoPunks, I got to become very good friends with Snowfro. And he reaches out to me and says, "Hey, Vaughn, I'm starting this new platform called Artblocks, and I think you should check it out and take a look at it." It's like, okay, and I didn't really know a lot about Gen Art, but I was a big fan of Eric, and he was always a very honest and helpful person. And yeah, so like I got into Artblocks right after CryptoPunks, and I was one of the biggest day zero minters. I minted 350 squiggles. I got very into, art blocks, and I was one of the first mods for art blocks Discord, and I was on the curation board for art blocks in the beginning. And, like that really like got me more focused on the art. So having arrived at CryptoPunks more from the collectible standpoint, getting exposed to art blocks really introduced me more to the art aspect of it. And I got very into generative art as a result of this, as a result of Eric red pilling me on gen art.
Amazing. What a crazy story. It's there's so many interwoven stories as I'm listening to you sort of speak as well. I'd love to sort of get Snowfro on at some stage. I did have Pixel Pete on as well, so he was another one that was very close to
Oh yeah, yeah,
Snowfro
yeah,
in that
yes,
early era too. So he had an
yes,
amazing story.
yes. I mean, I met him through art blocks. Yes, I've hung out with him a couple times in Marfa. Um, yeah, he's a good guy. He's known Eric for a long time, and he definitely got turned on to art blocks through Eric. And yeah, he's a hardcore art box collector for sure.
So then, yeah, your sort of digital sort of collecting sort of journey.
I guess like so once I got into art blocks and started building this art blocks collection, you know, when prices then started getting really crazy as we move into 2021, mid 2021, all of a sudden everyone's like wants to talk to me, everyone wants to trade with me, and I started thinking like, okay, maybe I can leverage my success in CryptoPunks and art blocks to really start getting more involved in other NFTs. So I became a very big buyer of Xcopy art and Axes, and really started saying to myself, okay, I know what's working. This is probably like early 2021 still. It's like things are starting to move up. Punks are now 15 ETH. Squiggles have sold out. They're a 1 ETH floor right now. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is really starting to go well. I need to take what I've been seeing and had success in and then start applying it to other areas in the space. So I started saying, well, what other NFTs have a large community, have a vibrant ecosystem? And that got me to Axes. There was a pretty big Xcopy following, so I got very into Xcopy, stuff like that. And then Twin Flames and Where My Bands Go and all these other collections I just started buying because I was like, okay, this is kind of like could be considered the golden era of NFTs, meaning it's early, we're starting to see some traction. Let's get some exposure to as many of these other NFTs as we can. I'm not really sure which ones are going to be super successful, but I've already nailed a couple of them. So let's try to make sure we have a little bit more coverage in case other spots start popping off also.
Amazing. And what a sort of journey. And where do you sort of think we are now, though? I think I think I read your recent tweet, which was really around basically weak market got you down. I lived through nearly every bear market, so obviously you've been through a fair bit of cycles. But I think the very last sentence, despite the pain, I'm undeterred and fully committed to the digital asset space. NFTs have a bright future. I said this in 2020, and no one believed me then. I'm saying it now again. What makes you have so much conviction in NFTs? And just timestamping this as well. This is like June 2024 when NFTs sort of feel like they've hit rock bottom.
Yeah, I mean, I guess having been through quite a few bear markets in not just in crypto, but in traditional markets, I do know how it feels at the bottom, and I do know how painful it can be. And I do know for people that haven't been here before, it's mentally trying. When someone like myself, who has literally seen it all, and not just in crypto, but in traditional markets, I know how I'm feeling, and I know it's tough. It, it's making me question everything. So, but having done this enough times, I'm able to look at it objectively, ask myself, has anything changed in my thesis? Has anything changed in the technology? Has anything changed in the way this is perceived? And I don't think it has. And so I don't think you should take your cue from price action. Yes, price action can put some pressure on you and make things more challenging for you and liquidate the people that are overexposed. But but the price action doesn't change where this is headed. And having collected lots of different things in my life, the biggest problem, the most fundamental problem that every single collectible market suffers from is a lack of provable scarcity and a lack of unquestionable provenance. And the two things that the NFT market absolutely guarantees you is unquestionable provenance and provable scarcity. And because the time scale is so short, people don't really appreciate how valuable that is. But I mentioned watches before. You cannot buy a Rolex watch from even the 80s and have any confidence that that anything about it is legit. There is very poor record keeping. There are lots of fakes and forgeries. You have every year there's rare old masters, impressionists, uh, Warhols are found to be faked or forged or altered. It's a major, major, major problem. It's not ever going to go away in traditional collectibles. And so because NFTs bring provable scarcity and unquestionable provenance, they are absolutely with 100% certainty not going away. Did we get a little overheated? People a little too enamored with the technology? Yes, indisputable at this point. This technology is revolutionary. It's a game changer for everything relating to collectibles and art. And as the world is continuing to move towards a more digital world, and the prospect of metaverses and the prospect of AR and the prospect of just more digital objects being involved in people's lives, this is fundamentally different. NFTs are a game changer. In 100 years, a 15-year-old with a laptop and an internet connection with 100% certainty will be able to look at a CryptoPunk and say, that is a CryptoPunk without any possibility of it being faked, forged, anything. And that's just not something you can do in traditional art, especially once you get 50 years in the future or 100 years in the future where the line of provenance gets more muddied. So I don't have any doubt in my mind that NFTs as a technology have a very bright future. And I believe that NFTs from this early period will absolutely be the gold standard. And I've said this in Discord before. There's 10,000 CryptoPunks. There's 60 million millionaires in the world today. I mean, it's 0.02 CryptoPunks for every millionaire. I mean, like I used to also say, 99% of people that will want to own a CryptoPunk don't even know they exist right now. So there's a bright future for the space. There's a bright future for these early assets. And to me, I would never let price action change that view. And even in that tweet you just mentioned, I think one of the most telling lines was in 2017, Ethereum got to 1,500. In 2020, it was at $90. That's a 94% drop. It wasn't over for Ethereum at $90. It wasn't over for Bitcoin at $3,000 in 2020. These assets then went on to massively rally and blow through the old highs like they were nothing. This is what's going to happen with CryptoPunks. I don't have any doubt about it. I understand when people start questioning the validity of the space and they start thinking that a zero is possible. Well, when you put a zero as a possibility in your mind of where something can go, it skews its expected value. It's not going to zero. It's literally not ever going to happen. I'd be surprised if they even get below 50,000. Is it possible? It's certainly possible, but I would highly doubt that. And even 50,000 wouldn't shake my belief of where things are going.
Yeah. I'm more bullish now. Thanks for the pep talk, Vaughn. Let me ask you another question then. How do you think about punks versus ETH? Do you think punks have a chance of?
Yeah, this is a tougher one. This is definitely one, especially now that ETH, you have a passive income potential from ETH. I think that what's happened is now that the peak is in the rearview mirror and we're deflating, that's the conventional wisdom. People are saying these assets will not outperform ETH. If you really believe in the space the way you believe it, you should just own ETH. And that was a very common thought in 2020 as well. When CryptoPunks were at 1 ETH and ETH was $200, there were lots and lots and lots of people saying that if ETH went to $1,000, punks would go to a quarter of an ETH, meaning they were priced in dollars and they would not rally if ETH rallied. And it turns out that ETH ended up rallying, 25x, and CryptoPunks ended up rallying 50x, or 100x. So it's hard to say how it will play out. I definitely was a little concerned in 2020 when I was buying a lot of CryptoPunks, and I'm saying to myself, "Oh, should I just be holding ETH?" And it turned out that obviously the right trade was to hold the CryptoPunks. I think now you've got that cycle kind of playing in reverse, where people are saying, "I don't want to own CryptoPunks." I think more or less because they're going down, not because they don't think they're interesting, or the reason why they bought them in the first place isn't still valid. I think that crypto in general is a very momentum driven space. And I think that when you see it turn, it will turn hard and you will see a nice rally. And then everyone will say, "Oh, I got to go to CryptoPunk, I got to buy CryptoPunk." And then, that's just the way it's going to be. But right, the pain trade right now is they're going down. No one wants to hold them. Everyone says they're going to underperform ETH. And you know what? That may happen. I guess I look at it like I'm in this space. I have a diversified digital asset exposure, some cryptocurrencies, NFTs. I play in DeFi. I try to have a little bit of exposure to everything, and whatever happens, happens. And you know what? Maybe CryptoPunks won't outperform me, but there's a very good chance, in my opinion, that they will. And I'm willing to hold them and see what happens.
Yeah. Well said. I think it's as you're sort of talking through that too. I sort of feel like there are some people out there that are using this as an opportunity to basically upgrade their punk to more of a dream punk or something that resonates more with them as well. So this is probably a good opportunity to sort of do that. Whilst we're sort of on that topic, I didn't get to ask you this question, and but it's a question I always ask everybody: is do you if money wasn't an issue for you, which I'm sure it probably isn't, but Do you have a favorite punk or traits that you'd like to collect?
I mean, look, I would feel like I'd love to own an alien, of course, and that's out of my price range. So, I mean, like, to me, an alien punk, it's the top NFT. Like, I don't, I can't think of an NFT that would be more desirable. I mean, maybe Seed Phrase's Seven Trait Punk is up there. Um, I remember when he bought that, by the way. By the way, everyone he laughed at him and thought he was the craziest motherfucker on the planet when he bought that punk. They literally
Was
thought
it
he was crazy. People, they
was
were
a st-
literally
was
laughing at him.
what was the story like? I'm sort of privy to that story. What?
So, when Seed Phrase came to the CryptoPunks Discord, it was just about a month or two after I had gotten there. And he starts buying a lot of the same things that I was buying and looking at things very similar. And we became very good friends because we have a very similar story. He got into Bitcoin around the same time I did, got into NFTs around the same time I did. And we looked at things very similarly. The only difference between him and me is he had bigger balls than I had. So he was willing to, you know, put a lot more into it. I wish I had had the same balls, but he was always like, buy the best. And so, when he saw the Seven Trait Punk, he had to have it. I think he paid $60,000 for it. And people literally thought he was crazy. They literally thought he was the dumbest person on the planet for doing that. They couldn't believe it. And I was just like, I don't know. I kind of like it. I mean, same thing. He bought a full autoglyphs set for like, I think it was 250 ETH. At the time, it was,
Did you get
go
into
ahead.
autoglyphs?
I did. I had, because all the punks people were really into them. I had five. I still have two. One of my biggest trades ever was I sold an autoglyph in October of 2021 for 375 ETH. It was 1.4 million bucks. I had paid
Insane.
$900 for it like a year earlier. Yeah. Yeah. That was one of my better trades.
Insane. Crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, he had Seed Phrase had bigger balls, definitely.
I need to try and get him on. And
He's great.
if you if you look across the punk community, do you have any sort of favorite punk personalities that come to mind?
I mean, like, I'm pretty friendly with 6529 and then also Cosmo. So Cosmo de Medici. So, like, I mean, those two guys, I think what I like about both of them and respect about both of them is they're not just talk. They're actually doing stuff in the space and trying to move the ball forward. I mean, especially 6529, is a very strong educator in the space and does a lot. So, I mean, if I had to mention two punks, those would be the two they've got giant followings. I mean, everybody knows who they are. Um, yeah, I
Absolutely.
would say those two.
Yeah, I've learned a lot of those two and their posts and just the way that they've gone about collecting and just being great advocates for NFTs in general.
Yeah, I
And
mean, seed
they
phrase too. So
absolutely. Um,
yeah,
and how would you describe punk culture for you?
I think punks are going to persist, whether Yuga owns them, whether someone else owns them, whether they have commercial rights or don't have commercial rights or whatever. I think that punks are in a very special place. I think that people should just try to leave them alone and let whatever happens happens. I think they're going to find their way into top museums. I feel with a very high degree of confidence you will see CryptoPunks in the Museum of Modern Art. Um, I think that people just need to back off a little bit and not be so focused on the short term and see the big picture and see the people that hold CryptoPunks and see the people that believe in this space. And these are people that are very well capitalized. They believe in the space. There's lots and lots of builders in the space that are big proponents of CryptoPunks. The CryptoPunks are going to be fine. And could they go to 10 ETH? They absolutely could go to 10 ETH. Do I think that's what's going to happen? I don't think that's what's going to happen, but Vaughn, if they go to 10 ETH, Vaughn will be buying them, I promise.
Um, just out of curiosity, how did you respond to, I guess, the recent Nina Chanel drop?
You know, I tried to stay out of it. Um, I was surprised at the level of hate, and I was surprised at the relatively large response. In the same sense, I was a little surprised that Yuga thought that infusing politics and infusing a lot of these more touch issues was okay. I'm a little surprised, but overall, I think it's blown over. I think that there's a lot of people making a big huff about it. I 100% stayed out of it, and but I think that in general, infusing politics and gender identity and a lot of the stuff, I think that while we all have enough of that in our lives, I would like to keep punks out of that. So I would say to you that I didn't voice my opinion publicly in any way, shape, or form. I don't have any issue. I think Nita's a great artist, and I have nothing against her. I just probably would have preferred to have a lot of that just left out of punks, but in the same sense, I didn't have a problem with it.
Gotcha. Eh, how do you feel about punks at the moment? Do you feel punks are broken, perhaps, or how do you? What's your sort of vibe check on punks, or what's your sort of take?
I mean, I love punks. I know that I will hold many punks for for a very long time. I'm fully committed to punks and what punks are about. I have, I don't really, in general, I guess I look at it like we are all just temporary owners of these assets, temporary stewards of these assets. I mean, the nice thing about blockchain and CryptoPunks is they will persist long past when you are and I are on this planet, and probably long past Yuga's lifetime. And so ultimately, I think their place in history and their meaning for art and collectibles and digital assets is so well cemented that doesn't really matter. And ultimately, their place in history is cemented. And I'm very happy with punks. I have no ill thoughts towards them. And again, like whatever's happening in the short term, it doesn't really matter to me.
Well said. Um, and how do you feel about V1 punks?
I have a relatively big issue with them in the sense that, well, just so you know, I did get my V1 punk of my profile punk from TJ, and I got that from him only so that someone else wouldn't be able to potentially use it against me in the future, or have some claim on it. I think that there's a I think that what's happened is some people, uh, in a way, are falsely pushing a story about V1 punks. If the same issue had happened in 2024, there would have been a burn to claim for punks, would have been the only way to get the new version of it. And that would have gotten rid of the old one. I think that given how new the technology was and given the what was happening at the time, I think that Larva just thought the cleanest way was to do it the way they did it, and just send new punks to the holders and correct the mistakes that had been made, and just say, okay, well, these are the actual crypto punks now. These old ones are no longer, no longer considered crypto punks. And without a marketplace, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. So let's just wash our hands of it this way. I think that people out there, pushing it as something other than what it is a mistake. They're not the first punks. They're not crypto punks. They're not better punks. They are, a mistake that had a flaw that was then corrected. Consensus is very clear in terms of what is a crypto punk, and it is not a V1 punk. How do you feel about it?
Um, all points are all valid, and it's a question that I ask every single guest, and it's just interesting over time to sort of see how it evolves. I'm probably more impartial. I think it's interesting. I'm probably in the same. The only thing that probably annoys me a little bit is sometimes the V1 community can be a little bit antagonistic, to say the least. And I find that a little bit annoying. But I mean, as a collection, I think they do have a place in history alongside,
I agree
punks.
they have a place in history. They
Mm.
100% have a place in history. I think that what's happened. Okay, this is the bottom line: is Hemba was a big claimer of punks. He was also sold a lot of his punks in very early. And literally, like as he was pitching out the last 25 of his punks, he immediately started spinning the V1 narrative that he was going to basically just pivot right to this V1 narrative. And even though he understands, like he's a very smart guy, so I'm in no way, shape, or form am I in any way saying this person doesn't know what he's doing. He's a smart guy. He's made lots of money. He's been at the right place at the right time. He's lacked the vision to see the bigger picture, but in the same sense, I give him tons of credit and respect for being in the space early and seeing it for what it is. It's just for him, it was always just about the money. And so creating a narrative around V1s was very much in his best interest. In fact, I'm 100% sure he's made more money off of his V1 punks than he made off of his actual crypto punks. And, and so by the way, like, I don't think he has any problem spinning a story about them that people believe and took in. And by the way, he's an OG guy, so like he gets respect in the space. So look, I'm probably going to get that'll be comments or something saying I don't know that this isn't true, but in the same sense, like this is what happened. This is how I remember it playing out. I mean, as soon as he finished selling his actual crypto punks, he was like, oh, I'm going to launch this wrap contract, these V1 punks, this is where it's at. But it was all just about making money. It's all it was. So, I mean, there's a reason why a lot of the OG punk people are not partaking in this because they see it a little bit differently. They see it as muddying the waters. They see it as, making things less clear and confusing. And yes, it is going to be confusing to new collectors. And, I'm surprised that it's even gotten the traction that it's gotten. But yeah, I mean, look, they're tokens on a blockchain. They do exist. They can't exist outside of the wrap contract, meaning you can't trade them because you had that exploit. And from what I understand, that exploit was used by Hemba himself, was the main person exploiting that, from what I've been told.
Yeah. That's right.
So
So I had him on PunkCast as well, and that was probably one of my favorite episodes too, actually, because I think prior to that, I was given sort of a bit of a steer that he was a bad guy, and I can sort of understand why. But I think as I sort of unpacked his story, obviously he's very well spoken and
yeah,
very thoughtful
smart guy. I
about
mean,
how
something
he.
about it.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. But I think the only thing that I sort of missed out of the whole story, which probably adds a little bit of weight to the V1s, was basically how Matt and John dealt with V1s when the contract was released. And I think, that probably put V1s back on the map in some ways. So I don't know. Do you remember what happened?
When they sold one, they sold a V1, that one?
Well, as soon as they
What?
found, yeah. So basically, Matt and John found out about the V1 wrappers, and they
Right,
wrapped them and basically dumped it on the community.
right,
And they found those wallets and sort of saying this is actually Matt and John's, and they came out and apologized and said everything was going to go to charity anyway. So
right.
that just wasn't a great look when you're trying
I
to
agree that
discredit
wasn't a great look.
and then sort of dump on the community spawn. So
Yeah, that was when we were definitely having some issues there. And then there was like, this is why, like, I urged them and the disc, having had some conversations with Discord mods or people when this whole incident was happening, it's like, this is why the commercial rights were very important as a distinguishing feature. So one of the things that Yuga did, obviously, by giving us rights to our punks, it distinguishes between the V1s and the V2s. Now, I don't even like using those terms. I should say real CryptoPunks and the V1s. So the real CryptoPunks have worldwide commercial rights. The V1s do not. Like, that's the difference. That's the fundamental difference. Now, not only do you have consensus as to what's a CryptoPunk, but one actually has rights and one doesn't. So, in fact, the V1s are using the images of the CryptoPunks. It's a violation. It's a copyright infringement. And here's the thing: this is the thing I don't think people understand. Most people, I don't think, understand is that when you quote unquote wrap a token, you're not actually taking a token and putting it inside another token. You are taking this token, the V1 Punk, and you're putting it into a smart contract, and a completely new token is being issued. That new token that's being issued doesn't have the image embedded in it. That token is not a CryptoPunk. It's just a token that represents the V1 CryptoPunk, which is not actually a CryptoPunk. It's a token. That's it. So yeah, I mean, look, I don't have a lot of love or affinity for V1s. I think that it was strictly propagated and put out there to monetize money, to monetize these assets for someone like Kemba, who is a smart guy but does not care about CryptoPunks, does not care about the community, in my opinion. So
Von, as I was sort of talking, and probably said it on a previous podcast as well, but this is what makes Punk such an interesting collection. I mean, there are these characters and these stories on this timeline that just add to the richness of the collection. And it's always, this discourse is always going to be around for the test of time when we start talking about punks, right? And it just makes it super fascinating. And I think, if NFTs are in the attention game, I think it might not be a bad thing in the long run.
no, look, you can't dispute that it's out there. You can't dispute that it exists. You can't dispute that it was any of that stuff. I just think that, like, from if you want to talk about from a value standpoint, like, what level of value should accrue to those tokens? Like, I mean, they should be worth 5% of what a punk is worth, maybe 10% tops. Like, I just don't think it should be more than that. I don't know where they're trading right now. I have no idea.
So, Von, one last question, or I guess two last questions before we sort of go. And since you've been so deep in the punk sort of space and the NFT space, but when you sort of look back in the whole sort of, CryptoPunk journey, like, what's been your favorite moment of that you've had that you can remember?
Favorite moment? Well, I don't know if anyone's ever asked that. It's a good question. My favorite moment. I remember being pretty thrilled when I secured my zombie. I remember being pretty happy about that. Um, you know, like, I don't want to talk about, like, necessarily like big trades, because that's kind of like the money is the money obviously is nice, and that's how, like, you get some validation in the space, but it isn't necessarily what makes me happy. I'm trying to think, like, securing certain assets. When I got my Lost Robbie, I was pretty happy about that.
Did you pick up a Lost Robbie?
Yes, I traded a CryptoPunk and a Squiggle for it, actually.
Wow. When was this?
Probably 18 months ago, I want to say. The cool thing, the person that I got it from, they had the original Christie's Tech Summit scratch off card, which they sent me. So I have the card that was used to claim the Lost Robbie also, which is pretty cool.
There was one that was intact that hasn't been scratched that
Yeah,
that got sold
yeah.
recently too.
Phantom Scribble. Have you had him on? He's pretty good. You should
Yeah,
talk to him.
I have. Yeah, I have. He's awesome. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
awesome. And I guess the last one is that I always ask is if you could pass on a message to the next owner of your Punk 1111, what would you like to say to them?
Well, I know who the next owner of Punk1111 is going to be. So it's going to be my daughter. And I'll say, take good care of it. And hopefully brings you success and good luck. And if you need to sell it for whatever reason, I understand. That's what I would say.
No pressure there when she listens to this when the times comes. Vaughn, this has been super fun, and I just love listening to your story. I guess any final questions and comments on your side?
Well, the only thing I'd say is like, it's hard predicting the future. It's hard to understand where trends are going to go, and most people are really bad at it, and they just take current trends and extrapolate them out in the future. So in 2020, when punks had basically done nothing, it was very easy to say, well, punks will continue to do nothing. And when they were going up in 2021, the conventional wisdom was, well, they're going to keep going up. And the conventional wisdom in 2024, when they're going down, is that they're going to keep going down. And when you extrapolate out a trend, you're usually right for some period of time, but ultimately you will miss the inflection point. And I don't know when the inflection point is going to come. I don't know when we're going to see things turn around in the space, but they are going to turn around, and you are going to see people come into the space. And I don't know much longer that's going to take. I don't know, but I also don't care because I'll be here when it happens. So try to stick to it if you can.
Amazing. Vaughn, what a pleasure having you on PunkCast, and an absolute honor having you as part of the punk community. I think we need more leaders like yourself that sing the punk gospel and carry themselves with that sort of degree of conviction. So thank you for everything you do, and thank you for joining PunkCast.
Hi, Max. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Guys, that wraps up an episode of PunkCast for the week, and we'll be back next week with another punk. Bye for now.